through Friday, Sactown Sports.
Going to try to put last night's loss on the back burner, at least for the time being. Going to talk about De'Aaron Fox coming up bottom of the hour, and you'll hear what he had to say, what De'Aaron Fox had to say about the upcoming matchup. And now we're going to look ahead to potentially the summer. Are the Kings looking at big changes ahead? Let's find out. Nice enough to join us, NBA writer for Bleacher Report, host of the Hardwood Knocks pod, Dan Favale. How are you today, Dan?
I am doing well. How are you guys doing?
We're doing fine, except that, we are pulling for the Kings here, and that was a tough loss last night. Looked like they were going to go 4-0 in this trip, and they come up short against the Nuggets. So, we're Kings fans are feeling that today, Dan, because they're still trying to figure out how good this current iteration of the team can be. There have been some encouraging signs.
Yeah, join the club. I'm still trying to figure out how good they could be, too. They've been, they've won a lot more than I probably would have expected in the aftermath of the De'Aaron Fox trade, and I think the offense has looked good at points. I think it's looked like the guys are trying to find themselves within it at points, but I think at least with all the injuries in the West, there's at least some margin for error for them to ensure they'll still make the postseason.
Mm-hmm. Dan, I know in your pod, I was checking out the Hardwood Knocks pod, and you have a list of teams that you think are headed for major change. How did the Kings end up? I think they're 7th on that list. How did they end up there?
I think it's more so kind of a signal of where are they going after this season, because that Fox trade kind of couldn't have been the end of it. They're certainly deeper. They still have a bunch of talent on this team, but does it all fit and coalesce together? And I think kind of two of the spots you still look at are, well, what's going to go on with kind of the point guard or floor general position, where it feels like they have a bunch of guys who would be great as your second best playmaker, maybe not your primary driver of the offense. And then, of course, we're also kind of waiting to see if they can get some additional looks in a frontline spot next to Sabonis, or even sometimes independent of him. Though, of course, Jonas Valanciunas has helped a great deal since he's come over.
Dan, is it one of the things when you're talking about change? Are you looking at head coach position as well, or maybe even a little front office when you take that into consideration?
It's not, and I feel like it should be. I think Doug Christie's actually done a really nice job since he's taken over, and the fact that Keon Ellis has been playing so much lately, again, love that. But I think normally in these situations, I might look to will something happen in the front office that then has to trickle down to coaching and the roster. But it does feel like Vivek is kind of settled where there, and so it would shock me a little bit if Doug Christie's not even coaching this team this year. And I think until you see that type of change upstairs, I wouldn't expect any turnover there. And this will be more about, I wouldn't even expect, I know some people have mentioned, could they maybe lean into more of a rebuild or a reset? And that's not a direction I would expect them to even sniff. So I think it's going to be more about the roster construction to me.
Yeah, let me follow up on that. Dan Favale with us from the Hardwood Knocks pod and Bleach Report. That whole tank or don't tank debate, Dan, has been hot and heavy in these parts over the last couple of weeks. And obviously right now, the don't tank people are winning by a wide margin. Is it something the Kings should look at this summer? You seem to think that they won't, and I agree with you. Do you think it's something they might be in position where they would be advised to look at it this summer?
I think people from the outside might advise them to strip it down and start totally over at this point. And so, especially if you're going to, if you're able to convey that first round pick to, I think it's Atlanta this year, you're kind of just unencumbered and you're free to then go that rebuilding route. But I just think what we know about this organization, I would expect them, I'd be more surprised if they went that direction than if we turned around and saw them really try to get in the running for a huge name and make some type of, blockbuster consolidation trade.
Dan, the West changes every single hour, if not every single minute at this point, especially once games are getting going on a daily basis. What's your thoughts on the West and more or less the back half of the West? How do you see it kind of shaking out right now?
The West is confusing, and I think that it's still super deep. And I think that if you're a Sacramento fan, I think you take solace in seeing that, okay, Dallas is just done. And Phoenix, they don't play like they care for more than 12 minutes a game. So you're kind of looking at who's in front of them and maybe some potential at the top where you might be facing them in the, a playing game or even in the first round if you're coming out of there. And it just sort of feels like, with the exception of Oklahoma City and maybe Denver, and then of course Houston, that the West is kind of littered with dangerous underachievers. When you're trying to look at, I could see Minnesota going on a run, or we could see Golden State now that they have Jimmy Butler going on a run. And what's going on with Memphis? Do you trust what they're doing on offense when it goes into the playoffs? And I think that kind of ambiguity lends itself to what might be more randomness than we're used to from the West in the playoffs, just because I think if you look at it now, the only team that I'm prepared to say is head and shoulders above everyone, and that includes, 1 through, let's say, like 8, 9 right now, it's Oklahoma City. And I think there are people around the league that don't even fear Oklahoma City, which I think is, I find that wild, but they're like the only team that I think's really separated themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
Joined by Dan Favale of Bleacher Report.
Yeah.
My apologies.
No, I was just going to say, not fearing the OKC Thunder. That's like, you're at Yosemite and there's a bear in your car and you're thinking, I don't have to worry about it. It's just a bear. What's he going to do?
A few pieces of trout.
Yeah. Oh, he's a big fuzzy bear. He's not going to hurt me. Dan, it's interesting with the moves the Kings made at the deadline. It looks like they are trying to, if you will, serve two masters. They did get some picks, unprotected picks back, but they also obviously bring in Zach LaVine. So they're trying to kind of rebuild on the fly, I would say. Would you agree with that? And how tricky do you think that is if you do?
I absolutely agree with that. And I think it's kind of mega tricky because this was a team that was searching to fill a pretty big hole or three before one of their two best players asked for out or they decided to move him. And now you're still kind of dealing with filling those same kind of holes. And when you're kind of just looking at the talent that's coalesced there, and I think, look, before the Sabonis injury, I think like this was sort of the biggest harbinger. Is like you could just see there's like this weird, and it's understandable because you turn over the roster midseason, but there's like a lack of synergy on offense where it feels like he's not getting up as many shots. He feels like he's trying to find his place. And that's been like one of the two fulcrums of everything that you're doing here. And so I think when you look at this roster, the three players I just kind of look at moving forward, it shouldn't be Monk, DeRozan, and Zach LaVine. And if you view Zach LaVine as so plug and play, he can go next to anyone, that's fine. But I think you ultimately need a better driver of the offense for everyone else than DeMar DeRozan or Malik Monk. And on top of that, you'd like to see them get another like wing type in there beyond Keegan Murray. If Jake LaRavia could hit more shots, it potentially could be him, but I think you definitely want someone higher end than that.
Dan, I think one of the, I would say, colorful conversations around here is Keegan Murray, and I think there's going to be a coloring book worth of colorful conversations moving forward with Keegan Murray. What's your take on Keegan Murray being an outsider, not being such as local, but having your eye, of course, on the NBA? What's a national view on Keegan Murray?
I think nationally he's still underappreciated for not just what he does defensively, but the workload that he shoulders on that end before. And I think that people nationally have probably pigeonholed him on offense. And I personally do not think the Kings have done nearly enough to ensure that doesn't continue to happen moving forward. And I think that that's where it could really come in handy to get an upgrade as a primary playmaker, even from De'Aaron Fox beforehand, but certainly from a DeMar DeRozan, Malik Monk, Zach LaVine perspective, because that's someone, if you're not going to put the ball in his hands, you really want to figure out a way to use him a lot differently than the Kings have so far.
Joined by Dan Favale of Bleacher Report. Dan, before we let you go, I want to ask the question of the Lakers. The Lakers just seem like they're clicking on all cylinders right now, and I don't know.
Isn't that great?
Right?
Isn't that tremendous?
just pains me to even say that. Do you see them as? I know we talked about OKC. Can they challenge OKC at all in your mind, or do you think it's just right now it's good graces and everybody's feeling lollipops and rainbows because Luka is there?
I think it's more so the latter. I just can't see them posing a real threat to Oklahoma City Thunder, maybe something like a Denver, or even like, I think right now if you're facing the Golden State Warriors, I'd probably pick them over LA. I know the defense has been really good since Anthony Davis last played like late January, but you got rid of two of your three most important defenders in Christie and Anthony Davis. I just don't think their success is going to continue to hold on that end. And I think that's been the most surprising aspect of post-trade, but just the Lakers this past like month and 2 weeks. And so once you get into the playoffs specifically and teams have extra time to game plan for you, I think that their center rotation, even just kind of being shallow beyond Dorian Finney-Smith when it comes to your perimeter defense, I really think that's going to be a shortcoming that does them in.
Yeah, some really interesting thoughts from Dan Favale in the Hardwood Knocks podcast. Check that out. Of course, he's a fine national writer on the NBA for Bleacher Report. Dan, we appreciate your time very much. Hope you have a great weekend, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Most definitely. Thanks for having me as always. Take care.
You betcha. You betcha. Yeah, the Lakers right now have won 7 in a row. Man, Jay.
Hey, why you bringing up negative stuff?
I didn't bring up the Lakers. Did I bring up the Lakers? Who brought up the Lakers?
That'd be me, man.
Yeah. 7 in a row. It does seem a little fairy tale-ish.
Yeah. It's interesting. It is interesting.
And then the NBA offices, they're giddy about that. At ESPN, that's all they talk about is the Lakers. Lakers. Most interesting thing in the NBA right now is the Lakers.
I saw something, I think it was on ESPN. Who would you rather have? And you know how the 4-letter does it. OKC versus Cleveland or Boston versus LA in the finals, which are 1-2, 1-2 respectively in each conference.
Mm-hmm.
I think I know your answer.
Who would I rather have?
Yeah.
I'd rather see OKC and Cleveland.
Me and you both.
Yeah. But I don't think the commissioner would allow that. If Boston and LA is anywhere near a possibility, they're going to make sure they do.
At least one of them, right?
Yeah. Well, they probably asked that because I think they play this weekend. I think it's
okay.
Like this, maybe the Saturday national game. I don't know. I don't feel the same way about that. That's one of the most storied rivalry in pro basketball history, Celtics and the Lakers. And even though right now they're both really competitive teams, Celtics are the champions, I don't feel like there's any there now. It's not Russ versus Wilt. It's not Magic versus Bird. Tatum versus LeBron. Yeah.
Doesn't pique your interest?
Could be a good game, an interesting matchup, but I don't feel like, whoa, Lakers, Celtics are back. They're not.
Is it because they haven't played each other in a long time?
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but do you feel that way at all about that rivalry?
No, I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
That, first of all, they haven't played each other in, a decade and some change. But I'm with you. I just can't stand anything, and I don't want to give no love to either of the teams, but I definitely don't want to give no love to the Lakers. So, no, that rivalry's dead.
Yeah. How much love are Kings fans going to give De'Aaron Fox tomorrow night? We're right back with his thoughts on tomorrow night's game next. Drive Guys, Sactown Sports.
The only place you'll find Keegan Murray is Sactown.